The sun beat down mercilessly on Samuel Harper as he rode through the Utah Territory on a sweltering July afternoon in 1878. His horses, hooves kicking up dust that seemed to hang in the air like a veil between him and the rest of humanity. And that was exactly how he preferred it. He had been alone for 3 years now, ever since Martha died of consumption, leaving him with nothing but memories and a profound distrust of attachment. The trail from Ogden stretched endlessly before him, winding through rocky terrain dotted with sagebrush and the occasional twisted juniper tree. He was heading back to his small ranch after selling cattle, his saddlebags heavy with enough money to last him through winter, when he saw something that made him pull hard on the reins. A woman stumbled along the trail ahead, her dress torn and dusty, her hair falling loose from what had once been a neat bun. She staggered like someone who had been walking for days without water, her arms wrapped around herself despite the heat. Samuel's first instinct was to turn away, to pretend he had not seen her, because getting involved with anyone meant opening himself up to pain again. But even in his isolation, he was not a cruel man. He urged his horse forward, the animal's hooves clopping steadily until he was close enough to call out, "Miss, you hurt." The woman's head snapped up, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. She was younger than he had first thought, perhaps 23 or 24, with delicate features now marred by sunburn and exhaustion. Her dress, though filthy and torn, had once been fine quality, suggesting she was not accustomed to this harsh landscape. "Please," she rasped, her voice barely above a whisper, "please help me." Samuel dismounted, approaching her carefully as he would a skittish horse. "What happened? Where's your party?" "Dead," she whispered, swaying on her feet. "All dead. Indians attacked our wagon train 3 days ago near the canyon. I ran. I just ran and kept running." He caught her as her knees buckled, the weight of her slight against his chest. She was burning with fever, her skin hot to the touch even through the fabric of her dress. He cursed under his breath, knowing he could not leave her here to die, no matter how much he wanted to avoid this complication. "All right," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "All right, I have got you." He lifted her onto his horse, then swung up behind her, keeping one arm around her waist to steady her as her head lolled against his shoulder. The ride back to his ranch took 2 hours, during which she drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes murmuring words he could not quite make out. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon when his small cabin finally came into view, nestled against a hillside with a creek running nearby. Samuel had built the place with his own hands 5 years ago, when he and Martha had first arrived in Utah Territory full of dreams about starting fresh. The main room was simple but sturdy, with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table, and a bed in the corner. He carried the woman inside and laid her on that bed, the same one where Martha had died, and for a moment the memories threatened to overwhelm him. He forced them down and focused on the present. The woman needed water first, then he would assess her other injuries. He retrieved his canteen and carefully lifted her head, dribbling water between her cracked lips. She coughed at first, then drank greedily, her eyes opening briefly to meet his. "Thank you," she whispered before her eyes fluttered closed again. Over the next several hours, Samuel worked with methodical efficiency. He cleaned the cuts and scrapes that covered her arms and legs, noting with relief that none appeared infected yet. Her feet were in terrible condition, blistered and bleeding from walking in thin city shoes never meant for the harsh terrain. He soaked them in cool water mixed with herbs, then bandaged them carefully. The fever worried him most. He had seen too many people die from fevers, had held Martha as she burned and shivered and finally slipped away from him. He made a broth from dried beef and vegetables, managing to get some of it into the woman before she fell into a deep sleep. Then he sat in his chair by the fireplace, watching her and wondering what in heaven's name he was supposed to do now. He could not abandon her, not in her condition, but having her here felt like a betrayal of Martha's memory, like he was replacing her somehow. The night passed slowly. He dozed fitfully in his chair, waking frequently to check on his unexpected patient. By morning, her fever had broken slightly, enough that he felt she would probably survive. He made more broth and managed to get her to eat a bit of bread soaked in it. Her eyes focused on him more clearly this time, taking in his weathered face, his graying dark hair, the way he moved with careful deliberation. "I am Beatrice Anderson," she said quietly. "From Boston. Samuel Harper. This is my ranch about 15 miles south of Ogden." "Boston is a long way from here," she continued, her voice still weak but stronger than before. "I came west with my uncle and his family. He wanted to start a trading business in California. We joined a wagon train in Wyoming, thought there was safety in numbers." Her voice broke. "I was gathering firewood when they attacked. I heard the screams and I just ran. I am a coward." "You are alive," Samuel said bluntly. "Sometimes that is what matters." Over the next few days, Beatrice slowly regained her strength. Samuel found himself drawn into caring for her despite his reservations. He helped her to the chair by the fire when she was strong enough to sit up. He changed her bandages and brought her food. They talked little at first, both comfortable with silence, but gradually small conversations began to emerge. She told him about Boston, about cobblestone streets and gas lamps and theaters that seemed impossibly distant from this harsh landscape. She spoke of her uncle, a kind man who had welcomed her into his home after her parents died of typhoid fever 2 years ago. She described his wife, their 3 children, all lost now to violence and circumstance. Samuel found himself sharing things he had not spoken of in years. He told her about Martha, about how they had met in Missouri and fallen in love despite her father's objections, about how they had traveled west together, full of hope and plans, about the day she started coughing and how it had taken her slowly, inexorably, over the course of 6 months. "I am sorry," Beatrice said softly when he finished. "You have known such loss." "We all lose things," he replied, staring into the fire. "That is just how life works." But even as he said it, something in him was shifting. Having another person in his cabin, hearing a voice other than his own, felt less like a betrayal than he had expected. It felt, against his will and better judgment, like coming back to life after a long sleep. By the end of the first week, Beatrice could walk short distances, though her feet were still tender. She insisted on helping around the cabin, doing small tasks like washing dishes or mending his shirts. Samuel protested at first but realized she needed to feel useful, needed to feel like she was earning her keep, rather than being a burden. He caught himself watching her sometimes, noticing the way afternoon light caught in her brown hair, the determined set of her jaw when she concentrated on a task, the rare smile that transformed her whole face. She was beautiful, he realized, but more than that, she was brave in a quiet way that reminded him of what he had admired most in Martha. One evening, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Beatrice looked at him with an expression he could not quite read. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me, all right? What happens to me now? I have no money, no family, nowhere to go. I cannot stay here forever, imposing on your kindness." Samuel was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with thoughts he had been trying to avoid. "You are not imposing, and you can stay as long as you need, until you are fully healed at least. And then what? I cannot exactly walk to California on my own." We will figure something out when the time comes. Maybe there is a family in Ogden that needs help, someone you could work for." The idea of her leaving, of the cabin returning to its empty silence, sat heavy in his chest in a way he had not expected. But what else could he suggest? That she stay here permanently, live with him unmarried, inviting scandal and judgment? Or worse, that she marry him out of desperation and gratitude rather than any genuine feeling? The summer days grew longer and hotter. Samuel took Beatrice around the ranch as her strength returned, showing her the cattle that grazed in the pasture, the vegetable garden he had neglected since Martha's death, the creek where cold water ran year-round. She proved surprisingly adaptable, asking questions about ranch life with genuine curiosity rather than the disdain he might have expected from a city woman. "I always thought I wanted to return to Boston eventually," she said one afternoon as they stood by the creek. "But now I am not so sure. There is something about this place, harsh as it is. It feels honest, real." "It is real, all right," Samuel agreed. "Really hard, really unforgiving, but I know what you mean. The land does not lie to you, it just is what it is." She turned to look at him, and he was struck again by how much she had changed in the 3 weeks since he had found her. The frightened, broken woman from the trail was gone, replaced by someone stronger, more present. "Thank you, Samuel. I know I have said it before, but I mean it. You saved my life. You would have done the same, I reckon. I hope so. But not everyone would have. Most men would have taken advantage or at the very least made demands. You have been nothing but kind and respectful." He felt heat rise in his face that had nothing to do with the sun. "That is just being decent. Decency is rarer than you might think." That night, Samuel lay awake in the small room he had fashioned for himself off the main cabin, staring at the ceiling beams and admitting what he had been trying to deny. He was falling for Beatrice Anderson. Not just attracted to her, though God knew he was, but genuinely drawn to her spirit, her resilience, the way she faced each day with determination despite everything she had lost. The realization terrified him because it meant opening himself up to the possibility of loss again, and he was not sure he could survive that a second time. The following weeks brought a comfortable rhythm to their days. Samuel taught Beatrice to ride his spare horse, a gentle mare named Daisy that had belonged to Martha. At first, Beatrice was nervous, but she proved a quick learner, soon riding alongside him as he checked fence lines and moved cattle between pastures. They worked together in the garden, coaxing vegetables from the stubborn soil. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, and Beatrice would read aloud from the few books Samuel owned, her voice filling the cabin with stories of far-off places and times. One Saturday in early August, Samuel suggested they ride into Ogden for supplies. It would be Beatrice's first time around other people since the attack, and he watched her carefully for signs of distress as they approached the small town. Ogden was growing rapidly, benefiting from its position along the newly completed Transcontinental Railroad. The streets bustled with activity, miners and railroad workers mixing with Mormon settlers and businessmen. Beatrice stayed close to Samuel as they walked through town, her hand occasionally brushing against his arm when the crowds pressed too close. They purchased flour, sugar, coffee, and fabric for a new dress for Beatrice, as her current clothes were beyond repair. At the general store, the proprietor's wife, a kind woman named Mrs. Jensen, took note of them with obvious curiosity. "Samuel Harper, is that you? We have not seen you in town for months. And who is this?" "This is Miss Beatrice Anderson. She was separated from her wagon train. I have been helping her recover." Mrs. Jensen's eyes sharpened with interest, no doubt already composing the gossip she would share. "How charitable of you. Miss Anderson, You are welcome to stay with us if you need proper lodging." The offer was pointed, suggesting that Beatrice's current arrangement was improper. Samuel felt his jaw tighten, but Beatrice responded with calm grace. "That is very kind of you, Mrs. Jensen, but Mr. Harper has been a perfect gentleman, and I am quite content with the arrangement until I am fully recovered and can make more permanent plans." They finished their shopping quickly after that and headed back toward the ranch. As they rode, Samuel could feel Beatrice's tension gradually easing. "I am sorry," he said finally. "Small town people, they talk, I know, and I suppose they have reason to wonder, an unmarried woman living alone with a man." She was quiet for a moment. "Does it bother you, what they might say?" "I stopped caring what people thought when Martha died. She was Mormon and I was not, and some folks never let us forget it, but we were happy anyway." He paused, surprised at himself for sharing so much. "What about you? Does it bother you?" "No," Beatrice said firmly. "I am alive because of you." Anyone who wants to make something ugly out of that kindness can go hang. Samuel found himself grinning despite himself. "Miss Anderson, I do believe you are picking up some Western ways." "Good," she replied, a smile playing at her lips, "because I think the West is growing on me." That night marked a subtle shift between them. They were more relaxed with each other, the easy comfort of people who had shared hardship and come through it together. Samuel found himself noticing small things, the way Beatrice hummed while she cooked, the careful way she handled his mother's old china cups, the sight of her standing on the porch in the morning light, looking out over the land with an expression of contentment. He was in love with her. The realization hit him one morning as he watched her feeding the chickens he had bought in town. Fully, completely in love in a way that was different from what he had felt for Martha, but no less real. Martha had been his first love, young and passionate and full of dreams. What he felt for Beatrice was deeper somehow, tempered by loss and hardship, built on mutual respect and understanding. But loving her did not mean he could act on it. She had been through trauma. She was vulnerable, dependent on him for shelter and safety. To declare his feelings now would be taking advantage of her circumstances, pressuring her into something she might not genuinely want. So he kept silent, wrestling with his emotions alone in the dark hours before dawn. September arrived, bringing cooler nights and the first hints of autumn color to the aspens in the high country. Samuel and Beatrice fell into the routine of harvest, preserving vegetables from the garden, smoking meat, preparing for winter. They worked side by side, their movements synchronized after months of living together, and if their hands lingered when they touched, neither acknowledged it. One evening, as they worked together to repair a section of fence damaged by cattle, a storm rolled in quickly from the west, dark clouds boiling over the mountains and unleashing a torrent of rain. They scrambled for the cabin, arriving soaked and laughing despite themselves. Beatrice's hair hung in wet ropes down her back, and her dress clung to her in ways that made Samuel quickly look away and busy himself with building up the fire. "We should get you into dry clothes before you catch cold," he said, his voice rougher than intended. "I will be fine," Beatrice replied, but she was shivering. "Though I suppose you are right." She disappeared into the bedroom to change while Samuel did the same in his small room. When they emerged, both in dry clothes with blankets wrapped around their shoulders, the cabin felt smaller somehow, more intimate. The storm raged outside, rain hammering on the roof, wind howling around the eaves. Samuel made coffee and they sat by the fire, listening to nature's fury. "I was afraid of storms as a child," Beatrice said quietly. "My mother used to hold me and sing to me until they passed. Martha loved them," Samuel found himself saying. "She would stand on the porch and watch the lightning, said it made her feel alive. You miss her very much." "I do." But it is different now than it was. For a long time, the grief was so sharp I could barely breathe. Now it is more like an old ache, still there but not consuming. He looked at Beatrice, the firelight dancing across her face. I think she would have liked you. I hope so. Beatrice's voice was soft. Samuel, can I ask you something? What do you want? For your future, I mean. Do you plan to stay here working this ranch alone forever? The question hung between them, weighted with implications neither could quite voice. Samuel took a long breath, choosing his words carefully. I do not know any more. Before you came, I figured that was my plan. Work the land until I was too old, then probably die alone, and that would be that. But lately, I have been thinking maybe there could be more. Maybe I am not done living yet. I am glad, Beatrice said, and there was something in her eyes that made his heart race. Because you deserve more, Samuel. You deserve to be happy. So do you, Beatrice. They sat in silence after that, but it was a charged silence, full of things unsaid. The storm continued outside, but inside the cabin felt warm and safe and almost unbearably full of possibility. The next morning dawned clear and cool, the storm having washed the world clean. Samuel woke early as always and found Beatrice already up, making coffee. She smiled at him, and he noticed she was wearing the new dress she had made from the fabric they bought in Ogden, a simple blue cotton that matched her eyes. I thought we could go riding today, she suggested. I want to see more of the ranch, the parts we have not visited yet. They rode out after breakfast, taking their time, following the creek up into the foothills where aspens were turning gold. The mountains rose majestically around them, peaks already dusted with early snow. They stopped to rest near a small waterfall, letting the horses drink while they sat on sun-warmed rocks. It is beautiful here, Beatrice said. I never imagined country like this existed. In Boston, everything was so close together, so built up. This feels endless. It can feel too endless sometimes, Samuel admitted. Especially alone. Beatrice turned to look at him, her expression serious. Samuel, I need to tell you something. I have been thinking about it for weeks, trying to figure out the right words. His heart began to pound. All right. I know I should move on, find work in Ogden or try to make my way to California like my uncle planned. That would be the sensible thing, the proper thing, but I do not want to. She took a breath. I want to stay here with you, if you will have me. Samuel felt like all the air had left his lungs. Beatrice, you do not have to say that. You do not owe me anything. This is not about obligation, she said firmly. This is about how I feel. About how I have been falling in love with you since you brought me broth and bandaged my feet and treated me with more kindness than I had any right to expect. About how the thought of leaving makes me want to cry because this place, this life, and most of all you, have become everything to me. I am 13 years older than you, Samuel said, his voice rough with emotion. I am set in my ways. I have failed before, could not save Martha. You could not save her from consumption. No one could. That was not failure, that was grief. Beatrice reached out and took his hand. I do not need you to be perfect, Samuel. I just need you to be honest with me. Tell me if you feel anything for me at all, or if I have been fooling myself. He looked at their joined hands, then up at her face, at the hope and fear mingling in her expression. The walls he had built around his heart over the past 3 years crumbled in an instant. I love you, he said, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. I have been trying not to because I was afraid, but I do. I love you, Beatrice. She made a small sound, somewhere between a laugh and a sob, and then she was in his arms and he was kissing her, and it felt like coming home after a long journey through darkness. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, her eyes were shining with tears. Marry me, Samuel said. Not because you need protection or a place to stay, but because I want to spend whatever time I have left on this earth with you." "Yes," Beatrice whispered. "Yes, absolutely yes." They rode back to the ranch in a daze of happiness, hands clasped between their horses, planning their future. They would marry in Ogden, Samuel decided, proper and legal so no one could question it. They would work the ranch together, maybe expand the cattle operation, definitely restore the garden to its former glory. They would build a life, piece by piece, on the foundation of everything they had both lost and survived. 3 weeks later, on a crisp October morning, they stood before a justice of the peace in Ogden with Mrs. Jensen and her husband as witnesses. Beatrice wore a new dress she had sewn herself, cream-colored with blue trim, and carried wildflowers Samuel had picked that morning. He wore his Sunday best, freshly washed and pressed, his hair neatly combed. When the justice pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel kissed his new bride with a tenderness that made Mrs. Jensen dab at her eyes with her handkerchief. The ride back to the ranch as Mr. and Mrs. Harper felt different somehow, official and real in a way that made Samuel's chest tight with emotion. When they arrived, he dismounted and then lifted Beatrice down, holding her longer than necessary. "Welcome home, Mrs. Harper." "It has been home for a while now," she replied, smiling up at him. "But I like hearing you say it." That night, they truly became husband and wife in every sense, and Samuel discovered that love could indeed bloom again, even in a heart he had thought permanently scarred. Beatrice was gentle and passionate by turns, patient with his nervousness about being with someone new after so long. They learned each other slowly, tenderly, building intimacy that went beyond physical connection to something deeper and more lasting. The winter that followed was the happiest Samuel had known in years. The work was hard, as ranch work always was, especially in the cold months. But having Beatrice beside him transformed every task. She learned to milk the cows, to churn butter, to bake bread in the temperamental stove. She read to him in the evenings and sang while she worked. She argued with him when she thought he was wrong, which was surprisingly often, and made him laugh with her dry observations about ranch life. In January, during a particularly fierce snowstorm that trapped them inside for 3 days, they talked about children. Beatrice wanted them, admitted she had always imagined having a large family. Samuel confessed his fears about bringing new life into a world that seemed so capable of snatching it away, but also his quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, they could build something lasting. "We cannot live in fear," Beatrice said, curled against him under the heavy quilts. "If we do, we are already defeated. We have to believe that good things can happen, that life can be more than just surviving." "When did you get so wise?" Samuel asked, kissing her forehead. "When I found myself lost on a trail and got saved by a grumpy cowboy with a good heart." Spring arrived with the usual fanfare of mud and new calves and endless work. Samuel and Beatrice worked from dawn until dusk, building up the ranch, repairing winter damage, preparing for the summer ahead. In April, Beatrice missed her monthly courses, and they began to suspect what was confirmed a few weeks later when she started experiencing morning sickness. Samuel was terrified and elated in equal measure. He fussed over Beatrice until she finally told him firmly that pregnancy was not an illness, and she was perfectly capable of doing her work. But he noticed he found excuses to check on her throughout the day, bringing her water or snacks, making sure she was not overexerting herself. "You are being ridiculous," Beatrice said one afternoon, but she was smiling. "I know. I cannot seem to help it. I love you too." In June, they made another trip to Ogden to purchase supplies and see the doctor, who confirmed that Beatrice was healthy and the baby seemed strong. The doctor estimated the birth would be sometime in December or early January. As they walked through town afterward, Samuel found himself thinking about the future in concrete terms. They would need to add on to the cabin, create a proper nursery. He would need to put away more money, make sure they had enough for the lean times. "You are thinking very hard," Beatrice observed. "Just planning, making sure I can provide for our family." "We will provide for our family," she corrected gently. "Together, like we do everything else." As summer progressed, Beatrice's pregnancy became more obvious. She bloomed in the warmth, her face glowing with health and happiness. Samuel found himself constantly amazed by her strength and grace and the miracle of new life growing inside her. He started construction on the addition to the cabin, working late into the evenings to get it finished before winter arrived. In August, they were working together in the garden when riders approached the ranch. Samuel tensed automatically, his hand moving toward the rifle he now kept closer after hearing about increased trouble with outlaws in the territory. But as the riders got closer, he recognized them as travelers, a family in a wagon with several children. The man introduced himself as Robert Fletcher, heading to California with his family. They had mechanical trouble with their wagon and wondered if Samuel might help with repairs. He agreed, and Beatrice insisted they stay for dinner. As they ate, the Fletcher's story emerged. They had left Missouri hoping for a better life out west, following the same dreams that had once driven Samuel and Martha. "It is a hard journey," Samuel said, "but worth it if you make it through." "Were you part of a wagon train?" Mrs. Fletcher asked. "No, my first wife and I came out alone years ago." He glanced at Beatrice. Beatrice came west with her uncle's family. The train was attacked. She was the only survivor. The silence that followed was heavy with understanding. Mrs. Fletcher reached across the table to touch Beatrice's hand. "I am so sorry." "Thank you," Beatrice replied. "It was terrible, but I was found by the right man at the right time. Everything since then has been a blessing." The Fletchers stayed the night and left the next morning with their wagon repaired and supplies replenished from Samuel and Beatrice's stores. As they watched the family roll away, Samuel put his arm around his wife's expanding waist. "Think that will be a someday." Loading up kids and belongings, heading off to new adventures. "I think our adventure is right here," Beatrice said. "But yes, I hope we have a wagon full of children making noise and causing trouble." "Just what every quiet man dreams of," Samuel said, but he was smiling. The months rolled by in a pleasant blur of work and preparation. The cabin addition was completed in October, a snug room with a window facing east to catch the morning sun. Beatrice sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her hands moving with practiced efficiency despite never having done such things before. Samuel built a cradle from oak, carefully sanding every surface smooth, determined that his child would have something beautiful and lasting. They talked endlessly about names, about how they would raise the child, about what kind of life they hoped to build. Samuel found himself thinking less about the past and more about the future, found that he could remember Martha with fondness rather than crushing grief, that there was room in his heart for both his past and present, without one diminishing the other. In late November, the first serious snowfall arrived, blanketing the ranch in white. Samuel made sure they had plenty of firewood stacked, that the pantry was full, that everything was ready for when the baby decided to make its appearance. Beatrice grew larger and less comfortable as December arrived, but she never complained, simply adjusted and continued with her daily routines. On a clear, cold morning in mid-December, Beatrice woke Samuel before dawn with a gentle shake. "It is time." Samuel leaped out of bed, suddenly wide awake and slightly panicked. "Are you sure? What do you need?" "Should I ride for the doctor?" "You will never make it to town and back in time," Beatrice said calmly, though he could see tension around her eyes. "We talked about this. You are going to help me like we planned." They had indeed talked about it, prepared as best they could with the doctor's instructions. But now that the moment was here, Samuel felt completely inadequate for the task. Still, he pushed down his fear and focused on being what Beatrice needed him to be: steady, calm, present. The labor lasted through the day and into the evening. Samuel stayed by Beatrice's side, holding her hand through contractions, bringing her water, wiping her face with cool cloths. She was extraordinary in her strength, focusing inward, drawing on reserves of courage that humbled him. As darkness fell and the cabin filled with firelight and shadow, she gave one final tremendous push, and suddenly there was a new sound in the room: the piercing wail of a newborn baby. Samuel moved quickly, following the instructions the doctor had given, cutting and tying the cord with hands that shook slightly. He wrapped the baby in soft blankets and placed the child in Beatrice's waiting arms. She pulled back the blanket to check, then looked up at Samuel with tears streaming down her face. "A boy," she said. "We have a son." Samuel looked at his son, perfect and tiny and utterly miraculous, and felt something shift fundamentally in his chest. This was what life was about, he realized. Not avoiding pain or closing yourself off to prevent loss, but opening yourself up to love despite knowing how fragile and precious everything was. "He is beautiful," Samuel whispered, touching one tiny hand. The baby's fingers closed around his, gripping with surprising strength. "He is perfect." "What should we name him?" Beatrice asked. They had discussed names but never quite decided. Now, looking at his son, Samuel knew exactly what felt right. "What about William, after your father?" Beatrice's face crumpled with emotion. "Yes, William Harper, that is perfect." The weeks after William's birth were exhausting and wonderful. The baby was healthy and strong, with dark hair like his father and eyes that seemed to shift between blue and brown. He had powerful lungs and used them frequently, especially at night. Samuel and Beatrice took turns walking him, soothing him, marveling at every small change and development. Samuel discovered a capacity for tenderness he had not known he possessed. He would hold William for hours, watching him sleep, talking to him about the ranch and the work they would do together someday. Beatrice would often wake to find them like that, father and son in the rocking chair Samuel had built, both peaceful in the firelight. "You are going to spoil him," she teased one morning. "Good," Samuel replied without a hint of apology. "He should know he is loved." Winter deepened and then slowly began to release its grip. By March, William was growing rapidly, becoming more alert and interactive. He would follow Samuel with his eyes when his father moved around the room, and his face would light up with what might have been smiles or might have been gas, but which they chose to interpret as smiles. Spring arrived, and with it the endless cycle of ranch work. Beatrice wore William in a sling while she worked in the garden, talking to him constantly. Samuel built a small pen near the barn where William could safely sit and watch while his parents worked with the animals. Life became a delicate balance of caring for their son while maintaining the ranch that sustained them. One evening in April, after William had finally fallen asleep and they had collapsed exhausted into bed, Beatrice turned to Samuel with a tired but happy smile. "Are you glad I was lost on that trail?" "Every single day," Samuel replied, pulling her close. "Finding you was finding my life again. You and William, you are everything I did not know I needed." "We should probably talk about having more," Beatrice said. "I want William to have siblings." "Let us maybe wait until he is sleeping through the night first," Samuel suggested, and they both laughed quietly, careful not to wake the baby. The years that followed were full and rich. William grew from infant to toddler to young boy, running wild around the ranch, learning to ride almost before he could walk properly, chattering constantly about everything he saw and thought. In 1882, Beatrice gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Caroline after Samuel's mother. 2 years after that, another son arrived, Robert, named for Beatrice's father. The cabin expanded again and then again, rooms added as needed, until it was a proper ranch house, sprawling and comfortable. Samuel and Beatrice worked hard, building the ranch into one of the more successful operations in the area. They hired hands during busy seasons, earned the respect of their neighbors, became pillars of the growing community. Samuel found that he was good at being a father, patient and kind but firm when needed. He taught his children to ride, to work, to treat animals and people with respect. Beatrice educated them in reading and mathematics and history, using the books she ordered from back east, determined that her children would have every advantage even on this remote ranch. On a warm evening in June of 1888, Samuel sat on the porch watching his children play in the yard. William was 10 now, already showing signs of becoming tall and strong like his father. Caroline was 6, wild and fearless and utterly convinced she could do anything her brothers could do. Robert was 4, quieter than his siblings but with a sharp mind that missed nothing. Beatrice came out and sat beside him, taking his hand in hers. She was 33 now, still beautiful but marked by time and work and childbirth in ways that only made her more dear to him. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children, listening to their laughter. "Do you ever think about that day I found you on the trail?" Samuel asked, sometimes. "It feels like another life, like it happened to different people." "In a way, it did. We are not the same people we were 10 years ago." "No," Beatrice agreed. "We are better, happier, more whole." She squeezed his hand. "Thank you for stopping that day. Thank you for not riding past." "Best decision I ever made," Samuel said simply. In 1889, their fourth and final child was born, another daughter they named Martha after Samuel's first wife. Beatrice had suggested the name, wanting to honor the woman whose death had indirectly led to their meeting, and Samuel had been moved beyond words by the gesture. Young Martha was an easy baby, content and calm, a welcome change after Robert's colicky infancy. As the 1890s began, the West was changing rapidly. The railroad brought more people, more opportunities, but also more complications. Ogden grew from a small town into a proper city. Other ranches sprung up, and the open range that had once seemed infinite began to shrink and become parceled out. But Samuel and Beatrice adapted as they always had, finding ways to make the changing world work for them rather than against them. William, as he grew into his teenage years, showed a keen interest in the business side of ranching. He would ride with Samuel to town, learning to negotiate prices and contracts, developing relationships with buyers. Caroline proved to have a gift with horses, able to gentle even the most difficult animals with patience and understanding. Robert was fascinated by the mechanical world, constantly taking things apart to see how they worked, talking about becoming an engineer someday. Young Martha, still small but growing fast, seemed to have inherited her mother's love of learning and her father's steady temperament. Samuel often found himself amazed by the life he had built. There were hard times, of course. The winter of 1892 was brutal, and they lost a significant portion of their herd. Caroline broke her arm falling from a horse in 1893, and the weeks of worrying whether it would heal properly aged Samuel considerably. There were droughts and debts, illnesses and accidents, all the normal trials of life. But through it all, he had Beatrice. She was his partner in every sense, sharing the work and the worry, the joy and the sorrow. They had grown together, built something lasting, created a family that would continue long after they were gone. On the hardest days, Samuel would remember that moment on the trail, seeing her stumbling through the dust, and marvel at how one split-second decision had transformed everything. In 1897, William announced his engagement to a young woman from Ogden, Emily Jackson, the daughter of a merchant Samuel had done business with for years. The wedding was planned for the following spring, a large affair that would unite two prominent local families. Samuel felt the bittersweet pang of watching his first child prepare to leave home and start his own life, but also immense pride in the man William had become. The wedding took place on a beautiful May morning in 1898, with the ceremony in Ogden's largest church and a reception at the ranch. The house and yard were decorated with flowers Beatrice and Caroline had spent weeks preparing. Friends and neighbors from all over the territory attended, a testament to the reputation Samuel and Beatrice had built over 20 years. As Samuel danced with Beatrice during the reception, both of them watching William and Emily swirl past looking radiantly happy, he felt a profound sense of peace. "Our boy is all grown up," Beatrice said softly. "He is a good man. We did well. We did we not? Somehow, against all odds, we built something wonderful." "You built it," Samuel corrected. "I was just stumbling through the dark until you arrived and lit everything up." "That is not true, but I love you for saying it." She smiled up at him. 20 years, Samuel. 20 years since you found me. Best 20 years of my life." As the new century approached, Samuel and Beatrice began to think about the future in different terms. They were both in their 50s now, still healthy and active but aware of time passing. William and Emily had given them 2 grandchildren, with a third on the way. Caroline had married a neighboring rancher, a good man named Thomas, who Samuel approved of and who clearly adored his spirited daughter. Robert had gone to college in Salt Lake City to study engineering, visiting when he could but immersed in a world of progress and innovation his parents could barely understand. Young Martha, now 11, showed every sign of becoming a teacher someday, spending her free time helping younger children in the area learn their letters and numbers. The ranch continued to prosper under William's increasingly capable management, allowing Samuel to step back somewhat, to spend more time with Beatrice and their grandchildren, to simply enjoy the life they had built. They took rides together like they had in the early days, just the two of them, exploring the land that had become so familiar yet never ceased to amaze them. One autumn afternoon, in 1902, they rode to the spot by the waterfall where Samuel had first proposed all those years ago. The aspens were gold, the sky impossibly blue, the air crisp with the promise of coming winter. They sat on the same sun-warmed rocks, older now but no less in love. "If you could go back," Samuel asked, "knowing everything that was going to happen, would you change anything?" Beatrice was quiet for a long moment, considering. "I would wish my uncle and his family had survived, that they could have known you and the children. But otherwise, no, I would not change a single thing. Even the hardest parts made us who we are." "I spent 3 years after Martha died thinking my life was over, that I was just waiting to die," Samuel said. "I was angry at the world, at God, at everything. And then I found you, and it was like waking up from a nightmare into something better than I had imagined possible." "We saved each other," Beatrice said simply. "You gave me a home when I had nothing. I gave you a reason to keep living. We were both lost, and we found our way together." They sat in companionable silence, holding hands, watching the play of light on the water. Samuel thought about the long road that had brought them here, all the choices and chances and moments that had aligned to create this life. He thought about Martha, hoping that wherever she was, she knew he was happy and approved. He thought about his children and grandchildren, about the legacy of love and hard work he and Beatrice were leaving behind. As the sun began to set, painting the mountains in shades of orange and pink, they mounted their horses and rode back toward the ranch house. Smoke curled from the chimney, golden light spilled from the windows, and the sounds of family drifted out into the evening air. Grandchildren playing, Caroline laughing at something Thomas said, the clatter of dishes being prepared for dinner. Samuel and Beatrice dismounted in the barn, working together to unsaddle and brush down the horses with the ease of long practice. When they finished, Samuel pulled his wife close, kissing her with the same tenderness and passion he had felt that first time by the waterfall 24 years ago. "I love you, Beatrice Harper, today and always." "I love you too, Samuel, with my whole heart." They walked hand in hand toward the house, toward the light and warmth and family waiting inside. The mountains stood eternal watch around them, the same mountains that had witnessed their beginning and would stand long after they were gone. But for now, they were here, together, surrounded by the life they had built from loss and loneliness, and a chance meeting on a dusty trail. Samuel thought about that day often in the years that followed, as he and Beatrice grew older together, as their family continued to expand with more grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. He thought about how close he had come to riding past her, to leaving her there to die because he was too afraid of being hurt again. He thought about all the moments since when he could have chosen fear over love, safety over risk, and how each time he had chosen to open his heart instead. In 1908, Samuel and Beatrice celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary with a large gathering at the ranch. All their children were there with their families, along with friends and neighbors from throughout the territory. There was food and music and dancing, and Samuel made a toast that left hardly a dry eye in the house. 30 years ago, I married the woman who saved my life, not just by giving me a reason to keep going, but by showing me that love does not run out, that there is always room in your heart for more joy, more connection, more life. Beatrice, you have given me everything I never knew I needed. Here is to 30 more years, God willing. They did not get 30 more years, but they got enough. Samuel passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1915 at the age of 68, with Beatrice holding his hand. He had lived to see the frontier he had known transformed into something more settled and civilized, had seen his children and grandchildren thriving, had known more happiness in his last 20 years than he had thought possible. Beatrice lived another 12 years, surrounded by family, still sharp and engaged until the very end. She spoke often of Samuel, keeping his memory alive for the younger generations who had never known him. She told them about how he had saved her on a dusty trail in Utah Territory, how he had been kind when he could have been cruel, gentle when he could have been harsh, open when he could have stayed closed. When Beatrice finally passed in 1927 at the age of 72, she was laid to rest beside Samuel on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a simple stone that read Beatrice Anderson Harper, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. Samuel's stone, placed years earlier, read Samuel Harper, who found his way home. The ranch continued on through the generations, passed down through William and his children, but the story of Samuel and Beatrice became legend in the family. How a lonely cowboy had found a lost woman, and how she had found her way into his heart. How two people who had lost everything had come together and built something lasting. How love could bloom even in the harshest soil if given the chance. Years turned into decades. The old ranch house was eventually replaced, the land divided and sold, the West transformed beyond recognition. But the story remained, passed down through the generations, a reminder that sometimes being lost is exactly how you find your way home.